It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Well, you've got plenty of experience here because buyer behaviour and competitive bidding trends, it is forcing buyers to rethink strategies and underscoring the demand for expert advocacy, and that's where you come in. But as I say, they're just not all the same, and you would see that in Sydney. You would hear the stories, know the people that shouldn't be doing it, but are.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. I think the buzzword of what are you going to be when you grow up is currently buyer's agent, because I've been seeing them pop up like mushrooms. You're certainly right. They're not all made equal, and there's quite a few of them that really should not be charging any buyers for the service that they're offering.
Yeah, there are these wide range of services, as I talk about, from boutique, personalised search and negotiations to fixed fee or premium concierge models. I think it's a little like the bees to the honey pot. There is so many big deals that are being made, and when people decide, I'm going to become a buyer's agent, it becomes a sort of a no-brainer. Let's go to Sydney.
Yeah. Buyers sometimes fail to understand when it comes to selecting a buyer's agent. It's not just about them having a social media presence or a schmick website. Those are not the reasons why you should be picking your buyer's agent. You should be picking your buyer's agent on their expertise. A buyer's agent should not be charging you money to practice their skills on your search, their negotiation skills on your house purchase, because you're going to be spending an enormous amount of money on the property itself. So you need a buyer's agent who understands the nuances of that the micro market, because Sydney, as you said, is made up of many different markets. Understanding how the agents work as well, having those relationships in place so they can leverage those relationships to help the client understand, okay, well, this agent is a massive deal doer. We need to be quick. Let's get you front and center. Let's get you ready to transact as soon as we get the green light from the agents, as opposed to other agents where they can't do a deal to save themselves and you have to wait till auction. A new buyer's agent or someone who has less than 5 years of experience simply should not be calling themselves an expert, and certainly should not be let out on their own claiming that they're going to help you buy better. And in most cases, these people are just really out just to line their own pockets.
I got to use this analogy. You might relate to this, Michelle, because part of the problem is they don't have the experience. They don't know a lot of the market trends in suburbs around Sydney. Now, years ago, I actually used to work in talkback radio. People would ring up and they'd be talking about something. A talkback host never knows everything. Of course they don't. And this is what I used to do, like any talkback person would do, is if you don't know the subject, you'd say, well, that's interesting. Why do you say that? And you get them to talk to you, and then you kind of form an opinion by the time they have spoken enough about the subject, and you can form something that you can give them back. And I think this analogy, Michelle, is a little like some of these buyer's agents. They don't know. They go in, they talk to these clients, potential clients. They ask them a ton of questions, and they're actually being informed by the people that are going to pay them.
Or in other cases, they end up following people like myself on social media and then replicate the information that I give to my audience and pretend it's their own, Yes, I see that all the time. And to be honest with you, it's a very scary thing for me in this industry because, people are going to think that we are all the same and we are not worth, paying for and sharing our expertise with the clients. So I think as a buyer, it's very important that you do your research up front and understand how long the buyer's agent has been a buyer's agent in that particular area. The quality of properties that they purchase is very, very important. Like, part of my job is to actually help the client walk away from a property that turns out to be subpar because, for example, we found something in the building and pest or in the strata report. And particularly those first home buyers are very vulnerable to that. They buy with their eyes and with their emotion, as opposed to really understanding the rigorous due diligence a property needs to go through and stand up with, and particularly off markets as well.
Ready to take your real estate knowledge to the next level? So are we.
When comparing luxury property values across Australia, the difference is quite obvious. If you look at the Sydney market, around 45 square metres for $1.4 million, while, as I said, Brisbane and the Gold Coast offers over double that amount. But it is horses for courses, isn't it? Quite a different scenario because it's sort of in a market all by itself when you look at Sydney.
In my market, I don't often price a property by square meters. I'm specializing up on the shores and most months. We see the uniqueness or maybe the locations or the facings, waterfront, deep waterfront with a jetty or without jetty. So hardly anything by square meters. I just actually picked my calculator and calculate one of the properties sold recently in eastern suburbs. We're talking about 45,000 to 92,000 per square meters. But, we never do that calculation. It's not because of my math, it's because it just doesn't work in the luxury market. Eastern suburbs of Sydney, in most months, some incredible records. I don't know if the Sydney is shrinking. So because I'm not the expert in Gold Coast and Brisbane, I heard the property is just going incredible in demand, But recently, Greg, it's funny thing is Gold Coast is actually upcoming. So we've got a couple of properties coming, for my off-market list. Incredible. We're talking about $30 million in Gold Coast. In luxury market, by saying that, I don't think we just sell the property by square meters. And the market, from my side, is not shrinking at all.
Yeah, the Gold Coast, it has become one of the most affordable luxury markets in the country. Now, anybody who bought in the luxury market on the Gold Coast pre-COVID, I've said this before, it is like literally winning lotto. Big money has been made there in the Gold Coast. I just want to come back to Sydney, though, because you were telling me off air, looking at something like $50 million for your clients, a $50 million property, you're struggling. Nothing on the market to find.
Yes, we did a Google search or domain real estate search for anything over $15 million. There's nothing on the market, but it doesn't mean there's no buyers or sellers. So, in our book at the moment, we have quite a few. I think I work it together probably about almost $400 million property start from. So one of them has a 44.5 million to about 150 million. So the vendor doesn't want to go on the market. And the buyer doesn't want to buy from the market because they know who is the seller and we know who is the seller and who is the buyer. So hopefully this year, 2026, and we have a big transactions off market.
And we're going to talk about the Asian demographics because, Monica, this is something that you've noticed is changing.
Yes, for my recent trip, we spent over a month, traveling Asia Pacific. I think demographic definitely has changed. Before we're talking about my buyers from probably about 35 to about 75, 80 years old. But the 75, 80 years clients actually happily settling back in China. Okay, so, they got all the helps and they live very comfortably. So what they're buying is they're buying for their kids. Every single person try to encourage their children. Normally they live in London, UK, US, and come back to live in Australia. So what is the reason? Because, Australia is very expensive to buy, right? So land tax, stamp duties, FRBs, etc. But they say, you know what? Money cannot buy safety.
Explore new property destinations where you could live with exclusive interviews covering real estate news and market insights.
And it's weird that 2030 is only a few years away. What are we going to be talking about? I wonder in 2030, where will we be? Who will we be with? It's an interesting thought because it is starting to loom large. But what was happening back in the 1970s in Australian real estate? In fact, after strong growth through the 1950s and 60s, Australia's housing boom in the 70s started to cool off. Rising inflation and tighter credit conditions slowed price growth, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, where affordability pressures were already emerging. If you have a look between 1973 and 75, there was a property slump. The global oil crisis and economic downturn triggered one of Australia's first modern property slowdowns. Interest rates climbed, see, didn't just happen to you. Unemployment rose and speculative development projects came to a grinding halt. Apartment oversupply in inner city Sydney became a talking point, with some investors caught overexposed. That was back in 1974 with those apartments in Sydney. We're still talking about them today. And then, of course, we had the election of Gough Whitlam in 1972, which did see a stronger federal role in urban planning, and funding flowed into infrastructure, sewerage programs and growth corridors, boosting land values in emerging suburban real estate areas. So there is a bit of a flashback to the 1970s. Right now, let's go to South Australia and catch up with Andrea Heading, the CEO of Real Estate Institute of South Australia. Interesting stuff there, eh, from the 1970s.
Yeah, exactly. When you look at sort of what happened, well, what's that, 50 years ago, 55 years ago, and then what's happening now. So, yeah, definitely, Craig.
Now, Adelaide, we like to talk about this mature market. It has transitioned from a hot growth phase, is that fair to say, into a more stable, higher-priced environment?
Yes, I think so. I think what we're seeing is that we're showing really the hallmarks of a mature housing market now in South Australia, and really the market's grown steadily, and now we've really seen it sort of settled at a higher level.
216 suburbs now record median house prices above the $1 million mark. I know before COVID, hard to imagine we'd be talking about that, with growth broadening beyond traditional prestige pockets into established family and lifestyle corridors. So quite a big change really there.
That's right. Probably what we're seeing now is a market that's grown steadily, and we're seeing it settling at a high level. And really, I mean, for homeowners, we see it sort of being a really positive outcome because it's equity gains are being retained rather than lost in sharp cycles. So we see values are really being supported by genuine demand, not really short-term speculation.
And what is happening around people building new? Because in South Australia, if you look at the numbers through PropTrack, they're suggesting that more established homes are favoured because of build times just being too long. However, if you look at the numbers, they are, in terms of time for new builds, going down.
2021, there was a build time of 8.8, so 8 months, 8.8 months. And then it rose a lot, and certainly between 21, 22 and 22, 23, but that was really just in terms of backlog. So that sort of increased up to 12.9, just over a year at the highest. We've seen it drop back now in South Australia to 10.3. So, whilst it's a couple of months over what it was, say, in the 4 years previously, we're seeing the trend sort of go, downwards rather than being sort of tighter in terms of what build is. But if you think from beginning to end of that period of the 10 months, when really what we're seeing in South Australia is once a house comes on the market, there's really quick clearance rate in terms of times on market. What's listed today really sort of like selling at speed.
And this silent spending, it can slash the borrowing power, as I mentioned, by up to 40%, making that home loan just so much more difficult to secure, which obviously you see.
Yeah, look, it definitely does. And I think the hardest thing with this as well is banks are okay in understanding what's discretionary and what is not. But I think to go one step further, It's more the borrower really understanding, well, how much can I commit to? And they might have a false sense of their budget that they can allocate towards a mortgage because they don't truly understand exactly how much their budget allows them to spend on a mortgage because they haven't audited or they don't know exactly where their money is going.
Yeah, and it's really one large purchase that ruins a budget, but rather the steady dripping of this everyday spending that you're talking about. We're talking about daily coffees and midweek takeaways that can erode pretty quickly and add up.
Spot on. I like to use the analogy of going to the gym. If you go to the gym once and do a really big workout, probably not a whole lot is going to change. But if you continue to go and the small workouts compound into a more beneficial body or healthy body, that's the same thing as spending. You go and do one large purchase, it's not really going to change a lot, but it's the small incremental spendings that add up, the coffee, the takeaway, and it's a behavior thing. There's nothing wrong with spending money on a coffee. When you're in control and you understand where your money is going, that's a behavior thing. When you don't understand where it's going, that's a behavior thing. So whether you choose what your behavior is, then that will allow you to maybe go and buy the coffee or buy your lunch once a week. But if you've got no control, it will control you.
This is a really good one because I'm kind of guilty of this. I think we all are. Unused or duplicate subscriptions, such as multiple streaming platforms. You sign up for these multiple platforms and you kind of forget them. Some of them are a free trial, these apps, and then they hit you. They start draining your account. Sometimes it's hard just to find out who to connect with and say, hey, stop taking my money.
Correct. And I think the subscription companies make a lot of money from this, the people that forget about it. And that's where this subscription-based model has been skyrocketing over the years. It's because people simply forget. And I'm guilty of it as well. I mean, at the start of the year, I had a Disney subscription come out for a couple $100 and I completely forgot about it. So I'm not perfect. And I think that people just really need to, every couple of months, go back and audit the last 90 days, look at where their money's spending and go old school. I mean, you talk about the 70s, get your statements, get a highlighter, go through and highlight, where have I spent my money? What can I cut my expenses out? Where could I increase my budget? So yeah, I'm pretty big on that.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.